You are listening to Think Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to Think Theory Radio, the show that brings you topics outside the mainstream realm of thought and ideas to make you think. And I'm your host, Damien Perdue, your revolutionary guide on this resistance ride of audio delights, or radio ride of resistance delights. And of course, I'm joined by Paulie C.
The whole world is listening. The whole world is listening.
Yeah.
The whole world is listening to Think Theory Radio.
And also streaming live on YouTube and also Facebook Live.
Yeah, the whole world is watching.
Check us out on the Think Theory Radio YouTube channel. I've never promoted that. I think it's fairly new.
Hey, that was a good way to do it, though.
Yeah. All organic. And since, everything that's happening in the city, unless you're living under a rock or got hit by a rock.
What's going on? You got Cubs fever?
No.
No.
Who?
What?
I don't watch minor league baseball.
Minor league baseball.
No, but, everyone knows all the ice goons running around and waiting to hear if National Guard will be deployed and protests and resistance. And I figured, we love to talk about history on this show, and we love to talk about Chicago on this show. So I figured, why not do a kind of a brief history of Chicago resistance movements and protests, and how many times has the National Guard been deployed in Chicago, called into Chicago? It's a lot more than you think. But first, I do want to say brief rest in peace to a friend of the station, a friend of mine in the art world. Tony Fitzpatrick passed away at the age of 66. And it's also kind of fitting in with the topic of the show because he was a very rebellious and radical artist, poet, radio host. He filled in here at WCPT many times. I got to work with him a couple times on the show. And also he was a boxer at one point in his life and an actor. So, yes, much respects to him and his family. He will be missed. He was a great guy.
I didn't realize, all that he had done. Designed album covers for Lou Reed, Neville Brothers, Steve Earle. The five-pointed star logo for Big Star, the taco place.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He did that, yeah. And the poster for 2015 Lollapalooza.
I think, didn't he do a Smashing Pumpkins album cover too?
I would not be surprised, but I don't know. But, and then actor, was in Philadelphia, Primal Fear, U.S. Marshals, was it Chirac, ER, Patriot.
Yeah, Patriot was pretty good if you never saw it. It's
I think you were telling me about it. He had a recurring role in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's about a spy / assassin who kind of doesn't want to do it anymore. He's a young guy, and Tony Fitzpatrick actually plays a janitor at the company that he's posing at, working at, his fake life, but he overhears him in the bathroom, so he starts to blackmail him. But then they kind of team up and become partners. It's pretty good. It's kind of funny, kind of dark. I've never seen it. I think it's 2 seasons.
Okay.
J.K. Simmons is in it too. But yeah, so much respect to him. And if you've never seen his work, look it up. It's really cool collage work.
Out of nowhere, I don't think we knew about him having any sort of illnesses or anything
Not that
like
I know
that.
of. Yeah, I believe it was a heart attack. So
okay,
you never know.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't know the most recent time he was been on Jones' show, but I know he makes frequent appearances, so it was probably recent that he was on.
And I know he would fill in for her. That's how I worked with him a couple times.
Okay.
So yeah. Back to the topic at hand. Oh, and then kind of, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this too. Yeah, I've been thinking about, with everything going on, I wanted to kind of bring it up. But also I had my own instance of resistance the other day. On Wednesday, there's a community center near my where I live that works with immigrants. And I heard whistleblowing early in the morning. And at first I was like, what's going on? I thought it was my air conditioner was messed up or something. I was but then I remembered they told me they had these whistles in case ICE agents were around. And I opened up the window and I saw them out there, and they're trying to like warn people. So I went outside to help them. And a bunch of neighbors came out, and some activists that are involved with like ICER, which is the Illinois Committee of Immigrant and Refugee Rights. Some people from San Bonifacio and Palenque, which are community center groups that help a lot of immigrant people, and just some neighbors came out, and we had heard they supposedly abducted about 9 people in the neighborhood. These are mostly day laborers that hang out at the gas station on Belmont and Milwaukee that look for, temporary work, construction, stuff like that. And also a tamale lady, real scourges to society,
Yeah.
So we were out there for about 4 hours, made sure that they didn't try to get into the center. We stood outside, and actually I saw when several of the other people went inside to make signs, we could hold up and like warn people that are around. I was looking across the street, and I saw this guy about a half a block down, and once he was walking in the opposite direction of me, and when he got towards the alley, he started getting really like fidgety, and he looked down the alley, and all of a sudden just started running. And then I saw this white SUV pull out of the alley, racing out, chasing him down. One of the ICE agents jumped out of the truck, started chasing him down the block. I immediately called the ICER number, which I'll give out in a little bit. I have it on my phone somewhere. But I tried to run down the block, but they were already too far away from me, and I'm not very fast. So
Yeah.
But I ran down, and then unfortunately one of the other neighbors who had saw it happening also ran out, and he came back. He's like, oh man, they already got him around the corner. So we went back up, told people what happened. We did see them circle around the block a couple more times. Every time we pulled out our cameras to film them, they raced off. And a journalist from The Atlantic came up, Nick Miroff, I think his name was.
Okay.
And he writes about immigration and stuff like that. But he came up, he was interviewing people, and it was a sad situation that people got taken, but it was also inspiring in a way, because to see how many people came out just to help, people that weren't activists or anything, just neighbors. And then a lot of people who were coming up, driving up to us. I mean, there was plenty of people who were just driving, beeping like, yeah, And then people that were coming up, asking us what we have seen and everything, because they're getting the notifications through different activist groups, through ICER and different ones. So I thought that was interesting to see. I hadn't seen it firsthand like that, and how quick of a response they do.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware about the organization behind that. All I know is like, the governor was saying take pictures and video and stuff like that, but I thought that kind of went, it goes without saying, even though you do want to say that sort of thing, but I didn't realize there's like phone numbers and apps and whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one woman came up and she showed me a picture of they had about 10 different license plates and car information, what to look for. They had already taken down. So it was, it was interesting to see how fast.
Yeah, observe and report.
Yeah, especially if you can get any kind of video. I mean, I think this is a big reason that they're, having to let people go, release them, even though they take them in. I don't know if you saw like that WGN producer.
Yeah.
Got taken in. She got released today. And, but you wonder if it wasn't on video, would she be released? Would people even know?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? And there was a woman, I just saw this on Instagram, is Alex Alot in L.A. back in it was July or August. She's an activist, but she was going to the detention center in L.A., helping people. She was doing like medical work, giving people food, stuff like that. And they, ICE agents targeted her. They opened up the gates, and they immediately rushed her. Like there's a crowd of people. They just rushed her, tackled her to the ground. Of course, people try to get them off and whatever, and they arrested her for assault of a federal agent.
Even though they were the ones that instigated it.
Yeah. So she was locked up. She got originally the not guilty charge, and then they brought the charges back.
Isn't that double jeopardy? You can't. Or did
they reopened the case or something like
some
this?
Some new evidence or something.
Yeah, but luckily I just saw the latest report is she did get acquitted, I believe today or yesterday. So, but if there wasn't video of it showing that she wasn't the aggressor,
you're wondering, who are they doing this to?
She could be locked up for 20 years.
Yeah,
and that's what they're trying to do. They're using this, obstruction of justice, and you're obstructing an officer, even if you go up just asking questions. And, that's why I would say, like, try to be, don't get close. You don't want to give them an excuse to say you did assault,
Yeah.
I'm also too worried about, which is another part of Chicago history, is the kind of the agent provocateurs. In a lot of these, if we go back to the Haymarket riots, which was in May 4th, 1886. This is a lot to do with what Labor Day and, the May Day and all these is because of the activists back then, like August Spies. And there was a rally for workers' rights for the 8-hour workday that happened on Randolph and Halsted over there in the Haymarket area. And somebody threw a bomb, like a dynamite bomb, killed one of the police officers and injured a bunch, I guess it was 7 police officers and at least 4 civilians, dozen of those were wounded. And then they charged 8 of the anarchists who were part of the organizing the rally. And one of them was August Spies, who was a major part of the labor movement back then in the late 1900s. But a lot of people believe they never actually had verifiable proof that he orchestrated it or he threw the bomb. A lot of people believe it was a saboteur, an agent provocateur that threw it to get things instigated. Mm-hmm. Now I believe it was 7 of the 8 men that were charged with conspiracy, convicted. They were hung. Sentenced to death and hung in downtown Chicago. And
that's definitely very 19th century.
Yeah. And one of them, I believe, went to jail. I think one died in suicide in jail. Suicide, quote unquote.
Epstein died of suicide in jail.
Mm-hmm. But, and then the same thing, believe in 68, there's a lot of belief that there was plants there that kind of instigated the violence. So I would say, be leery of who's around you, especially in these large protests. I'm just a little worried that somebody's going to try to spark something off. And then, it's not like we don't live in a country that doesn't have a history of soldiers firing on its own people, Kent State, many others. But yeah, it's, Chicago and protests go hand in hand. Unfortunately, Chicago and fascism kind of go hand in hand too. There's actually a lot of, in the early 1900s, there was a lot of pro-fascist movements here.
But that was at a time where the political shifting in this country, though, because there's, rises of socialist movements. Yes. And of course, depending on what slice of time we're talking about, there's the rise of the Nazi movement in New York in the 20s or whatever.
And in Chicago.
Or the KKK or whatever.
Yeah. There was the German-American Bund from 1936 to 1941, the Friends of New Germany. Those were established in Chicago in 1933. They traced their lineage back to earlier pro-Nazi organizations active in the 1920s. So there was, and then, but those, they built up the kind of the anti-Nazi movements, along with there was the kind of Italian fascism. I mean, we had the street named after Balbo, who was a fascist. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, at least not a long street,
He was
just a few blocks.
He was the Italian fascist aviation minister, Italo Balbo. And he also Mussolini came to Chicago back then too.
Okay.
So that there was but like you said, it was a different time. There was not to say there aren't fascists here now. I mean, when I was growing up, 80s and 90s, there were a lot of Nazi skinheads, but then there were also, counter to that, the anti-racist skinheads like Sharp, which was skinheads against racial prejudice. You had Shock, which is the skinheads of Chicago. Both of those groups would constantly go at it with the Nazi skinheads, which usually came from either like southwest side, like Marquette Park, or some south suburbs, more whiter areas, and they would try to come in town and wreak havoc. But there was resistance. All right, we're going to take a quick break. If you want to give us a call, hit us up at 773-763-WCPT. That's 773-763-9278. We'll get into a little bit more of the history of anti-fascist resistance in Chicago, but also how many times has the National Guard been called to Chicago? On Think Theory Radio, right after this.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today we're talking about a history of resistance movements in Chicago. Before we get into a timeline of different incidents and movements, let's take a phone call from Steve in the Gold Coast. What's going on, Steve?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I think it's a really interesting topic. Just happened to tune you guys in and got back from dinner with friends who are running the marathon. And needless to say, they had to eat early. They're going to be up at 4 a.m. So
yeah.
It was rather early for me to eat dinner, but I got home and I said, hey, let's see what's on WCPT. But I do think it's an interesting topic because I think that for people who are part of the protest movement, and as you pointed out, we have a long history of that in Chicago, it's a balancing act because on the one hand, you certainly have people out there in the streets that want to demonstrate their opposition to what's going on in terms of ICE and so forth, and this kind of immigration enforcement and the tactics being utilized by the Trump administration. On the other hand, the other side of that is, you need to draw the lines. Why so many people are saying, look, go out there, protest peacefully, document what's going on, but don't get caught playing checkers while they're playing chess. Mm-hmm. Because what this administration wants more than anything is footage of protesters out there hurting federal agents, being proactive in terms of being the aggressors on the ground, which gives them the excuse. So now you've already got the National Guard in the area, and exactly when they're going to be on the streets, if they're not already, that's a question. But, that's by all accounts a few hundred National Guardsmen. Now, how you get 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 here is by creating the kind of chaos that Trump wants to see and giving him the excuse, the so-called Reichstag fire here in Chicago. So in other words, is that what we want? So as I said, it's a fine line. And as you pointed out, I mean, we've had the National Guard deployed here at least 17, 18, 19 times over our history, as I recall. Yeah. Depending upon how you sort of calculate that. But the important thing is to remember that virtually all of those instances, it's the case where local officials agree that we need the National Guard, and in conjunction with the federal government, they are deployed. And this is in no way, shape, or form that sort of instance. So, you have a natural disaster, or you have, say, something akin to what happened in 2020 or in the 1960s in terms of civil unrest. That's large-scale civil unrest. So, all right, we bring in the National Guard for a few days, perhaps a week, and then they go home. That's not what this is. First of all, local officials don't want anything to do with it. And in that situation, there is this thing called the Posse Comitatus Act. And it's a specific law that prohibits, passed in the late 19th century, that prohibits the federal authorities from deploying the U.S. military into cities and states for the purposes of policing those states. Mm-hmm. So you can't do this. Again, and this isn't some archaic law. We actually updated it only a couple of decades ago, post 9/11. So, and the irony, of course, for people who follow the sort of conspiracy theories is that this is a conspiracy theory on the right that's been going around for decades. Mm-hmm. They're going to deploy the military. There's going to be some authoritarian takeover, all of this. Now all of a sudden, those people went silent. You're the people who've been talking about this, the Alex Jones nonsense, yelling about this for decades to the rest of us, that this is what's coming in America. And now that it's coming, but it's coming from your side of the aisle, all of a sudden you're silent on that. You people seem to have developed amnesia.
Yeah, and likewise, the same thing, most Republicans are kind of, they're federalists. They believe in, it's states' rights over an authoritarian federal government, right? And now you have a president sending one state's, a National Guard into another state clearly violates that whole concept, their whole basis of their belief system.
Oh, absolutely. And keep in mind where they're coming from. I mean, it's not a coincidence that they're Texans. They're not coming from Massachusetts. They're not coming from Washington State. There's a reason for this. So, in many ways, the Republican Party has now become the party of MAGA. Yep. They have purged many of the mainstream Republicans, old school neocon Republicans, from their party. And make no mistake, there are many who are still there, but they're just simply looking at where their bread is buttered. And currently, it's buttered by the MAGA wing of the party. So we're going to pay lip service to Donald Trump. I suspect they'll stay on board that train right up until they see it heading for off the tracks, and then all of a sudden it will be we weren't really behind him. I always had my reservations, that sort of thing. But for now, the only kind of Republican that's really got a life in their party is a MAGA Republican.
Yeah.
And now it is interesting that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are actually now standing up and saying no to their own party and a few others. So what we need is to make sure that if we can win decisively in the midterms, then that sends the message to the Republican Party, the larger Republican Party, that if you don't do some major corrections within your party, you're going to lose everything in 2028 and possibly for a few elections down the road, because that's what tends to happen when you institute very unpopular policies. You lose not just one election, but you can lose a whole generation.
Yeah, and I did also see, too, I can't remember his name, but the Oklahoma governor spoke out and said, hey, this is what they're doing, sending the National Guard from Texas and Illinois is totally what we're against. And he's saying that because I guess there's like a governor's meeting coming up soon. And he's like, well, I'm going to talk to Abbott. I'm good friends with him, because, this was when Biden wanted to, was forcing them, I want your National Guard to do vaccinations. I want your National Guard to do testing. They were opposed to that because they said that's overreach. So he actually has spoke up. So I forget the guy's name, but I give him a little props. Kevin Stint. So at least some of them are starting to speak up.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing about authoritarianism is that, you don't just wake up one day in power and decide that you're going to be evil despots. Mm-hmm. What happens is that, you move down that path slowly, and then all of a sudden, you violate X number of people's civil rights and then jail wrongly X number of individuals. And then all of a sudden that may turn into disappearing people, and then a few people die. And then you say to yourselves, well, you know what? If we lose power, someone's going to hold us accountable. So all of a sudden, killing 100 people allows you to justify killing 10,000 or a million, because you need to stay in power. Otherwise, you're going to be held accountable. You're going to end up in front of a firing squad, or you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. And so you then are motivated to stay in power, because otherwise, what is the choice? So this is the danger of this path in any country. We've always had checks and balances, but what happens in a system where the courts are apparently lower courts are siding with a lot of Democrats and a lot of Americans on these issues, but once it gets to the Supreme Court, all of a sudden, we've decided to toss out precedent. Mm-hmm. And we're saying, that's fine. New precedent. President can do these things. We're almost 250 years old as a country. We have never said that the president could do these things. Now, all of a sudden, he can.
Yep.
So, what happens when a regime controls the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, along with the White House? That's dangerous.
Yes. I agree with you, Steve. Thanks for the call and great points you have made. It's a sticky situation we're in right now. But this is, kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this topic today is in a way to be uplifting, in the face of authoritarianism, to kind of like say, hey, you know what, this city, we do have a history of fighting this.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time that we've had our backs against the wall and we've pushed and we've overcome, and we've been vindicated. I mean, if you think about it, if you go back, in a way, the city was born in protest. If you think about the 1812 Fort Dearborn massacre, and you had Native Americans who rose up against the soldiers that were occupying the land, and that was incorporated 25 years later as the city of Chicago. And then you go down to, like I said, I mentioned the Haymarket riots. You had where do you go? You had the Pullman
strike.
Yeah, the Pullman strike.
It was the lager beer riot.
Yeah. That's an interesting one too, and we've talked about.
I never known about this one.
You didn't? No, we talked about it on the show. I mean, it was a while ago when we did the beer oddities one or whatever.
Okay.
One of those. That was an interesting one because it was also had to do with like xenophobia, but against Europeans. This was when the Know Nothing Party, which called themselves nativists, which I thought is interesting because they were a bunch of white Europeans that, but to them, they believed, well, I was born here in America, therefore, I'm a native, and you're from Germany, you're from Italy, you're from Ireland, you're not American,
Keep going.
Yeah.
How did they resolve that? How did they get out of that one?
Like, what do you mean, the riot itself, or
no, the people that thought that the others were others? How did they eventually stop? I feel like that's incredibly relevant right now.
Did they stop?
I was born here. I'm an American. We speak American.
Right.
American. None of this bad bunny Spanish stuff.
Right. Well, it seems to be. Yeah. It's. I don't know if it has to do with the kind of like if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, or just an easy way to keep people kind of segregated. It's a great tactic of, controlling is divide and conquer, but it seems to repeat every time there's a new, different population of immigrants, right? So you had, like I said, you go back and it was the Germans, the Italians, the Irish, we don't want you here. Then you get, into the early 1900s and that's for some of the first immigration riots in LA with Mexicans and, it goes on into the 60s, the Pachuco era and riots and then obviously coming into the 90s, it was everything was anti-Muslim, everything was anti-Arab, right? And now it's kind of gone back towards Latin America and Mexico. Obviously has to do with a more recent influx of them, but then there's all kinds of like propaganda and racism tied in. For years, they've been trying to say, that, these Arab Muslim terrorists are sneaking in through the Mexican border, with all the other immigrants coming in over and, and it's just all hogwash. And, but it repeats and keeps going. And it's sad because, well, one, it's, because it's racism and everything, but also, two, to not know the fact that, one, this country is built on immigrants. Two, every class of immigrants that has come in is because the class before them gained ground and they became more economically stable and they started opening their own businesses and they had their own economic input into the society. So they stopped taking lower jobs. So the new crop of immigrants comes in, they take those jobs. And this all contributes to the economy. And this is what has propelled the American economy for the last 100 or so years. Maybe longer, 150 so years. So it's, but it is interesting. Yeah, the beer riots. I just laughed.
It sounds very Chicago. The lager beer riot. Right. German and Irish immigrants getting overcharged on their liquor licenses. It sounds very Chicago. 1855. That's wild.
Exactly. Yeah. 1855. You had several different. There was the Pullman one, but there was also the. What was the other? There was another workers not involved with the rail. There was like a
railroad strike of 1877.
Yeah, which
part of a nationwide wave of strikes.
I think that started in West Virginia.
Okay,
I believe. right?
Yeah.
And then so that was 1877. The Pullman one was what,
1894.
1894.
Haymarket was 1886.
Yes. So, I mean, imagine you think about that era from late 1870s through the late 1890s was like a lot of chaotic.
But even outside of Chicago,
Yeah,
like I
for
mean,
sure.
if you listen to the station, I do a lot of these like moment in labor, and a lot of it, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, is just a lot of unrest and trying to strike for being treated like a human being, whatever that would look like.
Yeah.
And usually end violently before someone has to step in and say, "Yo, we gotta negotiate something here. This is insane."
Yeah, and it's what's interesting too. It kind of goes along with what I was saying about people's feelings on immigrants and not really knowing the true history and their contributions. A similar thing is like with a lot of labor unions and a lot of kind of people on the right and MAGA hats, and they think that everything dear Democrat, you're a communist, right? Anarchist, socialist, right? But they don't realize that the 8-hour workday that they have, the weekends off that they have, the 40-hour workday, the child labor laws, vacation time, this all comes from movements spawned by communists and socialists and anarchists. You owe your workers' rights to them.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting kind of switch. I like they always kind of it's like what Steve was saying about how the conspiracy theorists are saying they're authoritarian, they're trying to move in, they're taking our guns, and then but it's the opposite side doing it. It's kind of a similar thing, There's also, obviously in Chicago, there was a lot of racial tension throughout, years. So you had a lot of the protests and, movements sprang out of there. It was like the Chicago race riot of 1919. There was a murder of a black teenager who swam across the segregated beach line onto the white beach. And then there was, black residents had to fight back against white attacks. There was like 38 deaths, heightened racial tension. In 1931, there was a housing protests, which erupted after police attempted to evict a 72-year-old black woman. This confrontation led to clashes between police and residents who were trying to place her belongings back in her home, resulting in the deaths of at least 3 black men. And you have, the school boycotts, 1963 and 1965. You had student-led boycotts with over 200,000 students participating in the 1963 Freedom Day, protested segregation and the use of Willis wagons, which were those outside mobile classrooms that they only used in either for black students or in black neighborhoods. Then you had the Chicago Freedom Movement, 1965 to 1967. This was a major civil rights campaign led by MLK Jr. that focused on open housing. The movement's marches into hostile white neighborhoods and subsequent negotiations led to a 1966 agreement and helped inspire the 1968 Fair Housing Act. And I remember there's a quote from him saying, he was from the South and he had never seen racism like he saw in Chicago. So it's, and I know like as Chicagoans, we like to feel, we have to, that we're a blue town, blue state.
But we're incredibly segregated.
Yes, and there's been a lot of racism here and throughout the years. I do feel like it's better
we've made
now.
Strides.
Yes,
we're not there yet, but we're making strides.
No doubt. I mean, I definitely think it's
on our watch as we get better as people. We teach our kids, and as years go by, and it'll get better and better. But gosh, is this just a hiccup right now in our existence?
No doubt. You also had 1968, obviously the Democratic National Convention. You had the what is known as the bloody Battle of Michigan Avenue in front of the Hilton.
Was that the same thing as where there was like it all kind of converged with the protesters and the police?
That was the whole world is watching. This was, police just started, indiscriminately bashing protesters, reporters, and bystanders. And that became, a huge part of Chicago's reputation. That was when, Mayor Daley, senior said, shoot to maim.
Yeah, and then was it the slip of the tongue where he said the police aren't there to restore order or something like that?
Yeah.
Preserve order.
And it's similar, it's similar. It just popped into my brain now. A little similar situation back in 1990, I think 1990, 1991, when they were protesting the Iraq War. I went to a Public Enemy concert at the Aragon. I was still in high school at the time. Me and my friend Selena, we went to that, and outside there was the Communist Youth Brigade were protesting the war. So by the time the concert got out, cops were already there, just beating down the protesters. But this convergence of just the timing of it, because as people were coming out of the concert, because they're walking directly into the protest and into the confrontation with police, they just started getting beat. So, luckily for me, I was with my friend Selena, she ushered us through right before it happened. So as we were walking down the block, we saw all the cops racing over there. And then I talked to friends who were there after, and they're like, man, I just walked out. Yeah, it was a great concert. And you just walk out and you get hit in the head with a billy club.
Jeez.
Yeah. And, this was before smartphones, before you could film anything. The only thing you can find that I've noticed that I found online about it is a Chicago Reader article from that right after it happened. So if you look that up, you can read about that instance. And it goes on. We have, in October 2002, there was, another more protests against the war in Iraq, a different war in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And there was a protest rally at Federal Plaza where, guess who got up and spoke opposing the impending war?
In Federal Plaza?
Yeah, in 2002. I'll give you a hint. He was a young African-American candidate for U.S. Senate.
Oh, Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was this demonstration. Then there was another demonstration in 2003, which resulted in mass arrests that a federal court recently found to have been illegal, costing the city $12 million in legal fees and settlements. But the 2002 speech by Barack Obama was widely considered what kind of propelled him into the spotlight.
$12 million for a settlement by the city just kind of feels like not much. I mean, we've had bigger settlements.
Oh, for sure. I think that was, I believe, a broad range of settlements. I think there's been $12 million for one person.
Yeah.
And there was one of the largest demonstrations in Chicago history was peaceful and uninterrupted in May 2006. A crowd variously estimated to between 250,000 and 500,000 people. So let's say 300,000.
For the Iraq War?
No, this was it was a primary Latino crowd. They marched from Union Park to Federal Plaza, protesting harsh anti-immigration law pending in Congress at the time.
Crazy. Okay, I don't remember this.
In 2006, it became a model for massive demonstrations across the country after that. And then, that you go into 2011, you had Occupy Chicago, which, correlated with Occupy Wall Street. That one, that was a lot less people, about 3,000 at the most.
It's bigger in New York.
Definitely a lot bigger in New York. And then that tied into with when there was the NATO was holding their summit here.
That's what I was thinking about earlier. I had the year wrong, but it was 2012.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And that one, that was, another, the National Guard got called in. But we're going to take a quick break. I know we've got somebody on the line. We'll get to you in a second. And when we come back, we will talk about all the different times the National Guard got brought into Chicago right here on Think Theory Radio right after this. Welcome back to Think Theory Radio. This is Damien, and today we're talking about history of resistance in Chicago. And before we get into all the different times the National Guard have been brought into this great city, let's take another phone call from Brian in Albuquerque. What's going on, Brian?
Hey, good topic today.
Thank you.
I just wanted to the era of the late 60s was really turbulent. If anybody doesn't know the history of the 68 Democratic Convention in Chicago, it's a must-read, and there was a movie made about it. I think it was called The Chicago 7.
Yeah, it came out a few years ago.
Did you get to see it?
I did not see it, but I heard it was really good.
Sacha Baron Cohen was Abby Hoffman.
Right.
He was pretty good in that.
Yeah. It was really well made. It told the story well. And another person in Chicago history that always gets overlooked is Fred Hampton. I don't know if that.
Yeah, Fred Hampton Jr., yeah.
Yeah, he was a 21-year-old, very charismatic leader of the local chapter of the Black Panthers in Chicagoland. And basically, the FBI wanted him dead.
Yeah.
And there was a famous raid with, I think they were Cook County Sheriff's Office people or people with the Cook County Attorney General's office. Anyway, they basically went in and assassinated him.
Yeah.
And Marvin Gaye wrote a song about it, I believe. Fred is dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very interesting time, and, you know, the fascists and the people in charge are pulling all kinds of strings and trying to, you know, Trump and his team are just throwing matches into a tinderbox trying to start a fire.
Yes.
And I think we need to all keep our heads about us and be smart and do the right thing. And if we unite and stand up to them together, I think we have an honest chance. But that's my input to the conversation. But highly recommend that movie, Chicago 7.
Yeah, and there was a movie about Fred Hampton as well that came out several years ago. The name escapes me right now, but I believe the actor from Get Out and a couple other movies played Fred Hampton.
Talking about Judas and the Black Messiah from 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Daniel Kaluuya or whatever. Kaluuya. Yeah.
So if you haven't seen that, check that out. And I'm glad you brought up Fred Hampton because I might not have got to him. So thank you for that. And thanks for the call, Brian. You too. Yeah, and it was such a cowardly assassination. They didn't even try to go in and arrest him. They shot through the walls while he was like sleeping.
I forget that that was not long ago in the grand scheme of things, you know, this country doing that.
Mm-hmm. And his son, Fred Hampton Jr., also, you know, is a huge activist. You know, and these were, you know, people that don't understand want to like categorize like the Black Panthers and everything as some kind of like terrorist organization. Like, no, they actually, you know, they created the free like meal system in schools. You know, they did a lot of work for implementing educational systems, free food programs, housing. You know, there's a lot of Chicago gangs have a similar origin story. I know, you know, now it's hard to see that because there's more, you know, drug dealing and violence. But originally groups, you know, like Latin Kings and the conservative vice lords, they started in a similar manner as the Black Panthers. These were kind of like a way to protect their neighborhoods from police brutality and also, you know, for lack of support. There was no, you know, funding for them in these different neighborhoods, so they would do their own. Back to, I find it interesting, and Steve brought up briefly too, that it's been 18 times since the late 1800s that the National Guard has been called in, but always at the state's request. This is the first time ever that if it actually happens, if hopefully that the judge, you know, I know that she did a temporary block on it. I don't really understand why it had to be a temporary block and couldn't just be a permanent one, but
I think probably just the precedent because they actually have to go and litigate all that, right?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know the whole legalities of it all, but she did make some very good points and, you know, seemed to be on the side of not having them here. So we'll see, you know, hopefully that happens because if it doesn't, this will be the first time ever that a president sent in a National Guard into a state and city without permission without even coordinating with the governor.
Ironically, also at the same time that he's clamoring for an International Peace Prize, sicking the military on his own people. But that's... that's
do a whole other episode on that one.
I don't know how to explain that one.
Well, as far as we know, the first time was the Great Railroad Strike in 1877, which we mentioned. That started in West Virginia. The President Rutherford Hayes, you know, hear his name often in the pantheon.
No, and I'm going to mess up my history here, but he was like the Reconstruction era after Ulysses S. Grant, and like the election of 1876. I want to say it was like this giant compromise where I think it was Tilden was going up against him, who was from possibly the South, or at least appealed to the Southern Democrats. but there was like some sort of the remove your troops from the South.
Yeah.
And Republican Rutherford Hayes from Ohio will become president. I believe, if I'm correct on my history.
Well, he deployed the Army in city after city throughout the East and Midwest. And strikers, they viewed them as strike breakers. And with the arrival of troops in Chicago, the violence escalated. And also civilian deaths. Chicago Times noted that the largely immigrant mob included women. They're called Bohemian Amazons. No bias there.
Yeah.
Wielding clubs in their brawny arms. This is like from the actual newspaper quote. The heavily armed authorities killed 30 protesters in the fighting, which included an incident known as the Battle of the Viaduct, because it occurred at a viaduct at 16th and Halsted, which I didn't realize that. I
never knew that one.
Yeah, I have my friends that used to live right there at that very viaduct, like right around the corner. I did not. I love that name. I mean, I hate what it is, but the Battle of the Viaduct sounds like such a Chicago thing.
I always joked that there was that thing like make up the name of a Chicago neighborhood that doesn't exist. And I was like, Viaduct Park. That sounds like...
yeah, right. Be like in a video game, like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know.
So it'd be like, Chi-Town or something, or whatever they'd call it. Yeah.
The Pullman strike, 1894, which we did briefly mention, and if a lot of people don't know that, the Pullman Porters, they were the first black labor union in the country. And this was Illinois Governor John Altgeld, Altgeld Street, named after. And he brought in the militia and army, but he thought that it would only lead to a repetition of the 1877 violence and would not send the militia to Chicago, and urged President Grover Cleveland to refrain from committing troops. Instead, Cleveland ordered the army in Chicago, and tragic events of 1877 were repeated. So a similar kind of instance where the governor, although was informed, kind of protested against it. The president denied that request, and violence happened.
So all these times, though, that the National Guard's getting sent to Chicago, was it Illinois National Guard sent by the governor?
Yes, I believe. I think that first one, it was actually the U.S. Army. The first one I mentioned with President Hayes. The second one, it says, I believe also, it says the Army in this. I don't know if this is National Guard or not, but the race riots I mentioned, 1919, there was a 4-day chaos, which finally ended by the Illinois militia and cooling rain. Although you might want to look up like when the National Guard started, because I mean, it might be categorized as National Guard, but maybe there was not an official title of National Guard until a certain point in time.
Yeah, I don't know my history on that one.
Google it.
1877 is when the Illinois National Guard was founded.
Okay. So maybe like Illinois militia / National Guard, or the same thing. West Side riots, 1966. And this was a crowd of 200 to 300 people began pelting officers with rocks and later threw homemade bombs, looted stores. I believe, I can't remember why this one happened. But after 3 nights of violence, Governor Otto Kerner activated more than 1,500 members of the Illinois National Guard. But many of them were sent home after a few days. March in Cicero, 1966. Black college student Jerome Huey went to Cicero May 25th, 1966 to interview at a freight loading company. On his way back to the bus stop, the 4 white teens attacked him with a baseball bat as he walked alone at 25th Street in Laramie. He died in hospital 4 days later. Demonstrators marched from Chicago to Cicero on September 4th, 1966. Police officers and 2,000 members of the National Guard with rifles and bayonets controlled the hostile crowd. Marchers proceeded south to 25th Street, where he was attacked. In 1967, 3 of the 4 teens charged with murder were convicted of voluntary manslaughter. Riots after the assassination of MLK Jr. in 1968, which, those were happening all over New York, Washington, Nashville, and in Chicago on the first night of rioting, 9 people, all black, were killed. 2 days later, the approval of Mayor Richard J. Daley, the U.S. Army was called in, and thousands descended on the city-troubled areas. Fires died out. 162 buildings have been destroyed, 12 people killed, and 3,000 arrested. More than 9,900 soldiers and airmen were activated from April 5th to 13th, 1968. The DNC, 1968, which you mentioned. Governor Samuel Shapiro ordered the National Guard to assist the almost 12,000 police officers. There was 1,000 federal agents and 7,500 U.S. soldiers. The first anniversary of King's assassination, 1969, 5,000 National Guard members were activated. Days of Rage in 1969. There was, trying to see the number, 2,500 National Guard members took to the streets. Now I'm trying to get through them a little quick because we're running out of time. I love this with the Chicago Bulls championship in 1997.
National Guard was called in for that?
So check this out. The Phoenix Suns used Chicago's call for the National Guard to be on alert in 1993 as a rallying cry because the mayor had them on hold, right? And Phoenix Suns heard about so they assumed that they were going to win, and the Phoenix Suns tried to use that, to boost themselves. But it didn't work. They lost. But 6,000 police officers and another 2,000 National Guard members were ready to hit the streets. Then, we mentioned briefly the coronavirus pandemic. There was National Guard brought out to administer COVID-19 tests, which I remember, I kind of forgot about that, but I did that. Me and my brother went, and that was like did have like a dystopian feel because it was in one of those the vehicle testing facilities, right?
Yeah.
And, it was just all these army people standing around. You're in line of a car. And you have everyone's got a mask. It just felt really weird, like a movie. And then eventually they did also initiate vaccinations. Protests after George Floyd's death in 2020. There was 375 National Guard members came out. I remember that too because I was working, doing deliveries, and I was one of the only people that could drive around downtown. It was, they had all the bridges were up, and there were National Guard Humvees around the different exits of the expressways and Lakeshore Drive. I'm seeing them drive around. That was kind of weird too because the streets were empty, but there were all these National Guard and cops around, and me delivering pizza. But and then the last one was the verdict in Derek Chauvin trial. There's 125 members of the Illinois National Guard. So that's a brief history of Chicago resistance, and the show is over. I want to thank those that called. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again next week and every Saturday, 6, 7 p.m. right here on WCPT 820 Think Theory Radio.